Okay, many of my friends sing the wonders of diversity. I try to tell them diversity isn't a moral good, but I end up looking like some terrible racist. Why isn't diversity a moral good? Well, diversity is a moral good, but you can't. Diversity by race doesn't produce diversity. That's called racism, that idea. Or diversity of gender doesn't produce diversity unless that's how you define diversity. Look, let's say that you get diversity partly as a consequence of personality, which is a good way of looking at it. There is more diversity within groups of people than between. So like men and women differ to some degree in their personalities, but there's far more difference between men within the male group and women within the male group than there is between the average or typical male and female. So it's a stupid way. Let's assume that what you want, the organization is pursuing a complex goal, and you want a variety of skills that would be suited to that goal. Then you want there to be enough diversity of ability within the group so that the goal can be achieved in a efficient and inexpensive manner, right? Because what do you want? Inefficient and expensive? Obviously not. So there's a presumption that you get diversity by using identity politics categories, but there's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. So that's why diversity defined by race or ethnicity or gender is not only not a moral good, it's actually a moral evil, because it dispenses with the whole idea of the individual. It dispenses with the idea of competence. It just replaces it with the assumption that if you randomly select from the population, because that's how you would get real equity, you randomly select from the population, that gives you the best qualified group of people. Well, you wouldn't do that to select a plumber. It's the stupidest possible way of selecting for anything randomly. You know, there's no difference between selecting randomly and selecting accidentally. So it's moral diversity defined properly is a moral good. Diversity based on identity politics categories is a positive evil. You know, Trudeau, our prime minister, is a great example of that. So back, I think it was in 2015, he announced that half of his cabinet was going to be women because it was 2015 or some like muddle-headed virtue signaling excuse for not thinking. I think only 20% or 25% of the elected MPs were female. So the proper balance on average would have been 25% female, 75% male. What he should have done was figured out what qualities would make for a competent cabinet minister, because it's actually quite important to have competent cabinet ministers, and then selected from among his people for nothing other than competence. But he could virtue signal, and then he set up the most important board, let's say, of the entire country on a quasi-random basis. Jesus, how pathetic. He should have been pilloried by Canadians for that. But we're so clued out, and also in the situation that you described, is like, if I say, well, 50% of Trudeau's cabinet shouldn't have been women, it's like, oh, you're a misogynist. It's like, no, only 25% of the elected officials were women. Now, you might say, well, it would be better if 50% of them were elected. It's like, maybe it would be better, but it didn't happen. So you can't fix it at the top end. It was appalling. So it's a hard argument to make, because you need to know that there's more difference within groups than between them in order to be able to come up with a credible argument, And then, so, yeah.